Hey everyone, Wags here from Eagle Dynamics. In this DCS MiG-29A Fulcrum video, we'll discuss operation of the Fulcrum's radar, the Infrared Search and Track System, or IRST, and using them with the Fulcrum's air-to-air weapons. The radar provides all-weather day or night detection and tracking of aerial targets in electronic warfare environment for beyond visual range combat, short-range close combat modes. This includes settings designed to maximize performance based on target closure rate, automatic designation, and antenna steering. The IRST, on the other hand, provides shorter range yet passive aerial target detection based on a target's infrared signature. Both the radar and the IRST can work cooperatively. The Fulcrum also boasts a helmet-mounted sight, or HMS, to cue high off-boresight missiles like the R-73 Archer. Let's get started. Okay, so here we are in a GDR Fulcrum over Germany, and today we're going to be discussing the sensors as well as air-to-air weapons. First, up on the weapon control system, or WCS panel, we so far had this in the nav or navigation setting, but today we're going to move this clockwise up to the RAD position, and this is going to allow us beyond visual range air-to-air combat. Right above that we have the target span dial, and in this context we're going to use this for the best efficiency for semi-active radar guided missiles like the R-27R and the R-27ER, and we can spin it either to the right to increase the expected target size, something like a bomber or a tanker, or we could go to the left for something smaller like a fighter. We'll keep it right about here for now for today's test. Next, let's take a look at the left quarter panel and some of the radar controls. First we have delta H, or the difference in height from our current altitude. Right now you can see that it's set to 0, so the radar is going to be looking for targets at roughly our same altitude, whereas if, say, we set it to positive 6, it'll be looking for targets 6 kilometers above our current altitude, where if we go to, say, to negative 4, as you might imagine, it's going to be looking for targets at 4 kilometers below our current altitude. Let's go back to 0. Coming down we have our mode switch, which I'm going to set to auto, and when in auto it acts much like the interleave mode for the Hornet radar, and that's going to alternate in bars between high PRF, or pulse repetition frequency, and medium PRF. And as you may recall from earlier videos on different aircraft, high PRF is going to give you the greatest detection range, the greatest power out, but it's going to be most effective against high closure targets like those flying nose to nose with you. Whereas with medium PRF, it's a lower power out, so less detection range, but it will give you better detection against lower closure targets, like, say, those flying perpendicular to you or even away from you. So by alternating between those, it will kind of give you the best of both worlds. However, if you know the intercept geometry is, say, high closure, say nose to nose, you could go to head on, and this is going to allow the radar to only transmit in HPRF, whereas if you go to P for pursuit, it goes to medium PRF only. So again, that would be targets that you're, say, following, or is in the notch and you're trying to get a lock on. But for the most part for this video, we're just going to keep it in auto for now. Coming down we have the dummy switch, either illuminate or off, and this basically allows you to put the radar into an override when it's set to off, and transmitting when it's up to illuminate. Obviously we're going to keep it in the up position. And then to the right of that we have the radar compensation switch, which if you have a large target, it'll still allow you to detect and track even if it's bigger than the strobe. But we're going to come back to this in a later video. And then to the right of that we have the track while fly switch. The top position is forward hemisphere, and the bottom is rear hemisphere. And what will happen is, with this enabled, based on the geometry, either forward or rear hemisphere engagements, it'll allow the weapon control system to automatically move the cursor and latch onto a target that it detects. So with RAD selected as our weapon control system panel mode, we have some new symbology up on the HUD as well as the HDD. On the left side, we have the selected mode for RAD, and in the center, we have our designation cursor, which can be slewed either using the horizontal and vertical axis commands for the target designator, or it could use keys, a period, comma, backslash, and semicolon. At the very bottom, you can see a horizontal line in the center, and that indicates the azimuth that the radar is searching. So right now center, but using the zone switch, we can go to the left, back to center, to the right, back to center. And we also see all this reflected on the HDD or head down display as well. But the HDD also has some additional information. In particular, on the right side, we have a vertical line with a triangle on the left side, which is a reference for our current altitude. And then to the right of that, we have a small line, and that indicates our delta H, which we just talked about, and it gives you an understanding of where the radar is looking in relation to our own altitude, either above it, below it, or again, it could be level. And of course, at the very bottom, we see a number cycling between 1 and 4, and that simply indicates the bar of the 4-bar raster scan that the radar is on. Now, up on the HUD and the HDD, we can see the 3 contacts displayed in range and azimuth. And range is in relation to the range scale on the left side of those displays. And each contact is represented by a line composed of 3 dots. If you see a double line, that indicates a friendly contact. Now, there's 2 different ways we can designate and lock these up. The first is, like we just talked about, we can manually slew the designation cursor over a contact and then press and hold the lock button. Just like that. And then from the HOTAS commands, we're going to do the brake radar lock depress. And the second way is, again, going back to the track while fly switch, we're going to go to forward hemisphere because these are high aspect. And you can see that a square designation cursor is automatically placed over the highest threat target, and it's latched to it. And all we have to do now, again, is press and hold the lock button, or left Alt and Q, and we can lock it up that way as well. Now, when using the track while fly mode, you can see it's still designated, and when the target range is less than the bar on the inside of the range scale, it will automatically lock up the target for us. And there you go. Now, with the target locked up, we have some new symbology up on the HUD, as well as the HDD. So, the range scale, we can see again, it's about 25 miles at the top, near about 2 at the bottom. Of course, this will depend on your units of measurement setting. We can also see an arrow inside the range scale, and that indicates the range to the locked up target. In this case, we're at about 15 miles right now, and we can see 3 bars. The top bar indicates the Rmax, or the maximum range of the missile for the locked up target. The middle is the no escape range. So if you were to launch the missile, even if the target were to turn and run, the missile still should be able to run it down. And at the bottom, of course, is the minimum range. Attached to the range scale is an arrow, which indicates the target aspect. So we can see that it's actually a very high aspect right now, and just a little off to our left. In the center is our target steering circle, which behaves much like in navigation. It steers us to the target in this case. Launch. Then also within the circle, you can see a small diamond that indicates where the radar is looking. So if the diamond were to be in the center of the cross, it was looking straight ahead, whereas we can see it's actually angled off to the left a bit. Then in the bottom right corner, we have the selected missile, in this case an R-27R. We have the launch authorization indicated by the LA because target range is less than target maximum range. Pause it here for a second. And then at the bottom, we can see the selected weapon station and active missiles. So in this case, because we have the inboard station selected for the R27, we see the 2 lines, and we also see numbers above for 1 and 2, indicating that the R27s on those stations are ready to launch. But we're going to unpause for a second, switch to outboard now. We can see a 73, which for the outboards, again, it'd be the R73s or the R60s. We can see the inboards have 1 and 2, but there's no lines indicating those stations are not selected. But the 4 outboard stations are indicated by the lines, but because the R73 is not in launch parameters, there's no numbers above those selected hardpoint lines. Now, so far, we've only been using the radar in the RAD mode, and now let's take a look at the infrared search and track, or the IRST system, by moving the weapon control system switch to IR. Now, the IRST definitely has some nice advantages. In particular, of course, it's a much more stealthy attack. The targets will not get a radar indication that they're being searched, locked, or even launched on. And of course, the infrared system will not be affected by electronic countermeasures. On the other hand, it has a much shorter range, it's affected by weather, and even some units could detect the laser designator. Up on the HUD, you can see that we have a vertically elongated cursor now compared to the radar cursor. And we also can see we have some ground interference from the sensor as well. But we can reduce or increase the gain with the IR gain and HELM brightness control here. So I'm going to reduce all the way down to 0. And we see we lost all that, but also really not so much the target. So we're going to increase it back a bit. And up on the HUD, we have a little dot there. We're going to go ahead and place the cursor over it. Press and hold the lock button. And now it's locked up. And also note, with the IRST, it is not stabilized in pitch or roll. We can also see that we have the R27 selected, and because that requires the radar, we're giving no indication of those missiles being ready to launch. We just have those weapon stations selected. So let's select the outboard stations. Launch. And now we can see the R73s are selected and ready to go. Now that we're talking about the IRST, let's talk about another switch up on the WCS panel, the prepare switch. So right now it's in auto mode, and what it wants to do is it wants to use a laser rangefinder to get range information out there. It's already passed the target from the IRST to the seeker, but until we get to about 6.5 kilometers from the target, there's going to be no range information, and that's why we have the flashing launch authorization queue up on the HUD in the HDD. If we had to switch in the manual mode, it would not flash. You pretty much have to gauge range visually. So as you get closer, put the burners on, you wait for the laser rangefinder to be able to range the target. Okay, so now we've got range, and we can also see that the launch authorization queue has stopped flashing. It's solid. And Fox. So the next IRST mode we're going to talk about is the Close Combat Mode, or CC. We're going to select that on the WCS panel. And we have these 2 vertical lines again. We'll place the target between them and press and hold the lock button. So I have the lock established. Let's go to R73s. Just like with the radar, with the IRST, we can hit the brake lock button to break the lock. And for all IRST modes, both the sun and high cross-view targets can make tracking a little difficult at times. Let's now take a look at the crowd pleaser, the helmet-mounted sight, or the HMS. And to activate that, on the WCS panel, we're going to go to HELM, and we're also going to press right control, right shift, and M at the same time to bring the helmet-mounted sight over our right eye. But if you're in VR, it could be over the right eye, the left eye, or both eyes if you wish. So now we can see we have two concentric circles in the HMS in acquisition mode, where we can adjust the brightness with the IR gain, helmet's brightness knob. And you can do this up to 60 degrees off the nose in vertical and in azimuth. And to designate, all we're going to do is we're going to use our head position to place the inner ring over the target, press and hold the lock button. So you see the segmented circle indicating that the HMS has handed off the target to the sensors. We also see an A for a good track on the left side of the HUD in HDD. Let's go to R73. Seeker looks good. We have a launch authorization and Fox 2. And brake lock. Fox 2. Pretty cool. Next, let's take a look at the OPT mode. And again, down at the WCS panel, we'll go to OPT. And the big thing about this is we now have a steerable cursor up on the HUD that we can train the sensors and seeker to. So using the same slew switch we did for the designator, we can slew it over the target. Press and hold the lock button. Let's go to R73 and get within range. There, and Fox 2. Drop the lock. Fox 2. Okay, next. Now, in this last WCS mode, we're going to take a look at Boresight. So select Boresight or BS on the panel. And this mode does not use the radar or the IRST. It's only using the infrared seeker in the R73 or R60. So I'm going to change my weapon to R73. And all we have to do is place the cross in the center of the HUD over the target, wait for a tone. No range information, as you might imagine, as long as we have a good tone, and then visually judge we're in range. Fox. And it's certainly most simple, but always a good backup if you need it. Let's now talk about what happens if you lose your HUD. Well, if that happens, we'll go to the Reticle mode, which is on the HUD control panel, top setting. And we can see that we're still in Boresight mode on the weapon control system. And we're going to need an IR seeker, so we're going to go to the R73's outboard. And if we're in range, we'll bring the target into the reticle, and hopefully we'll get a good seeker tone. There it is. Of course, we could gun him by going to the second detent on the trigger. Naturally, we do not have any range information, so you'll definitely have to eyeball it. Okay, good tone, and Fox 2. We're going to shift gears now and talk about using the gun in air-to-air mode. First, we're going to do an asynchronous mode. Basically, we're going to be using the sensors, the radar, and the IRST to help direct the gun reticle onto the target. And we can do that in RAD, IR, CC, HELM, or OPT modes. I'm going to go close combat, C. So you see the target ahead of us. We're going to lock them up by holding the lock button. And to bring up the gun, we're going to go to the first detent on the trigger. Gonna pause here for a second and zoom in. So On the left side, of course, we have our range scale. At the bottom, we have two bars on the inside of it. The top bar is 800 meters, and the bottom bar is 200 meters. And of course, we have the arrow at the top around 1.5, indicating the current range of the target. So as you can see, it's still relatively far out of range. Of course, then we have a circle around the target, and in the bottom right corner, we see rounds remaining in quarters. So between 75% and 100% would be a 4. Between 50 and 75%, it would be a 3. Between 25 and 50, it would be a 2. And between 0 and 25, it would be a 1. So let's pause for a second. Let this play out. So as we get closer, we're going to start to see the gun reticle appear. You can also see the wingspan at 105, which is rather large. Let's bring that down. And about 0.65, we'll see the reticle start to pop up. There it is. And excuse the debug line there. So all you need to do is place the gun reticle over the circle or the actual aircraft itself and pull the trigger. The nice thing about that, even in night or in bad weather, even if you can't see the aircraft, as long as you can put the thing on the thing, so to speak, you can still hit that target in bad weather. Also, we have the option to shoot all rounds in a single burst in all position, or if you go to down position, it'll do it in 25 to 27 bursts. Now, like I mentioned, in addition to the asynchronous mode, we also have the funnel as a backup, which will not use any sensors. And to bring it up, we're just going to go to the first detent on the trigger. That brings up the funnel. And to use it, all we need to do is fly to place the wingtips of the aircraft on the edges of the funnel, and assuming if you have the wingtip set up correctly, it's pretty accurate. So folks, I hope you enjoyed this video on the sensors of the Fulcrum and the air-to-air weapons, and I will see you next time. Thanks.